They found pieces of human fingers inside the Suya paper. That night, the market was in chaos. Women screamed, men shouted, and children cried as the police dragged the famous Suya seller away. Everyone had been eating his meat for years without knowing the truth. He had been feeding them human flesh. But months before that night, nobody suspected anything. The man's name was Jonah, and he was known as the best Suya seller in town. His stand was always full, smoke rising into the air, pepper filling every corner, and people lining up with money in hand. The meat was soft, hot, and spiced in a way no one else could copy. Customers laughed and argued about football while chewing the meat, never knowing they were eating something far worse than beef. Jonah walked with calmness, smiling at everyone. His sharp knife flashed under the dim bulb as he cut the meat into thin strips, wrapping them in old newspapers. The crowd never saw his trembling hands whenever someone asked him where his meat came from. He would laugh it off, claiming it was from a special farm outside the town. One night, a young man named Daniel came to buy suya. He took one bite and frowned. There was something about the taste that bothered him. He chewed slowly, staring at Jonah with sharp eyes. The other customers laughed and clapped their hands, saying Jonah's suya was the sweetest in the state, but Daniel only swallowed hard and asked, "Where do you really get this meat?" Jonah smiled, but for the first time, the smile didn't reach his eyes. Daniel did not let go of his question. He stood at the stall even after getting his suya, watching Jonah's every move. The others around him didn't care. They licked pepper from their fingers and laughed about politics, football, and the price of food in the city. But Daniel's eyes stayed fixed on Jonah, who avoided meeting his gaze. "Meat is meat," Jonah finally said, trying to sound casual. "As long as it fills your stomach and tastes good, why ask too many questions?" He forced a small laugh, but Daniel did not smile. Instead, he wiped his hand with the corner of his shirt and replied, "Because not all meat is the same." Jonah's chest tightened. He had heard things like this before. A few times, people had made jokes about his meat being too sweet to be ordinary cow meat. He had always laughed it off, turning their suspicion into a joke. But this young man's tone was different. It wasn't a joke. It was serious, almost dangerous. That night, after the crowd faded and the market grew quiet, Jonah packed his knives and closed his store. He walked quickly through the back streets, carrying the small cooler where he kept the leftover meat. He felt the air pressing against him as if the night itself was watching. Inside his small rented room, Jonah opened the cooler. The chunks of meat were wrapped in black nylon bags. He sat on the floor, unwrapping them slowly, and stared at the pale flesh. To anyone else it would be unthinkable, but to him it was his business, his survival. He whispered to himself, "Nobody will ever know." But deep down, he feared Daniel would not let it rest. The next evening, the market was as busy as ever. Lanterns glowed, smoke filled the air, and voices rose and fell like music. Jonah returned to his stall as if nothing was wrong. His knife was sharp, his pepper well mixed, and his smile fixed in place. Customers crowded around, handing him money, eager for the taste that had made him popular. But Daniel came again. He did not join the laughter. He stood aside, arms crossed, watching Jonah like a hunter waiting for his prey. Every slice of meat, every drop of oil, every laugh Jonah gave, Daniel's eyes followed. When Jonah noticed him, his hand shook for just a second before he steadied it. "Back again, my friend?" Jonah asked loudly, trying to make it sound like a joke. Daniel didn't laugh. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving the meat on the hot grill. "Yes. Back again. I want to know why your suya tastes different. Others may not see it, but I do." Some customers laughed and teased Daniel, saying he was jealous or maybe too picky. But Daniel ignored them. He bought another piece of suya, bit into it slowly, then spat it out on the ground. "This is not cow meat," he said firmly. The crowd went silent for a moment. Jonah's heart pounded. He forced a laugh, waving his hand. "Oh, young man, you talk too much. This is cow meat, I swear. Maybe your tongue is confused." But Daniel's eyes grew colder. He leaned close enough for only Jonah to hear. "I will find out the truth," he whispered. Jonah froze. The night suddenly felt heavier. He knew this man was not like the others. Daniel was a danger. Jonah could not sleep that night. He tossed on a stained mattress, sweating even though the air was cool. Daniel's voice echoed in his head, "I will find out the truth." He sat up in the darkness, staring at the black nylon bags hidden under his wooden table. Each bag carried a piece of the secret that kept him alive and at the same time could destroy him. In the early hours of the morning, Jonah left his room and walked to a small stream at the edge of town. He carried one of the nylon bags with him. The water was cold, the moonlight silver on its surface. He opened the bag and dropped the remains into the stream, watching them float away. "Nobody must ever find out," he muttered. But even as he said the words, he felt like unseen eyes were following him through the shadows. The next day, Daniel was not at the store, and that gave Jonah some relief. He served his suya to customers, laughing and smiling, pretending his world was normal. But deep inside, the fear had planted itself firmly in his chest. He knew Daniel was somewhere, watching, waiting, planning. That evening, as Jonah closed his stall and began walking home, he noticed footsteps behind him. He turned quickly, but the street was empty. He walked faster, his sandals slapping against the dusty ground. The footsteps grew louder again, matching his pace. He broke into a run, turning corners, his heart beating wildly. Finally, he reached his room and slammed the door shut. His breath came in gasps as he leaned against the door, sweat dripping down his face. He looked around the small, dark room, but it was empty. Still, he could not shake the feeling that someone had followed him home. The following morning, Jonah tried to convince himself it was only his imagination. Maybe nobody had followed him. Maybe Daniel had lost interest. He forced himself to smile as he set up his stall again. The fire burned, the smoke rose, and soon customers gathered, laughing and joking like always. Jonah's knife moved quickly, slicing through the meat, but his eyes kept darting around, searching for Daniel in the crowd. By evening, just when Jonah began to relax, Daniel appeared. He did not join the line. Instead, he stood a short distance away, leaning against a wooden pole, staring silently at Jonah. The look in his eyes was calm but dangerous, like a man who already knew the answer but was waiting for proof. Jonah's hands trembled so badly that one of the customers asked, "Are you all right, Ogre?" He forced a laugh and nodded, but inside his chest, fear was boiling. When the crowd thinned, Daniel walked up slowly. He bought a stick of suya but didn't eat it. He held it in his hand and said, "Soon, everyone will know what you are hiding." His words were quiet, but they cut Jonah like a knife. Jonah's heart almost stopped. He wanted to shout, to threaten him, to deny it loudly, but his tongue felt heavy. "Be careful with your mouth," Jonah finally whispered, but his voice shook. Daniel only smiled and walked away, leaving the suya untouched on the counter. That night, Jonah stayed awake again. Every sound outside made him jump. A barking dog, a whistle from far away, even the creak of the wind against his window, all made him fear Daniel was coming for him. Jonah realized something: if he wanted to survive, he had to deal with Daniel before Daniel exposed him. Jonah's fear grew into anger. He could not sleep, and he could not think of anything except Daniel's words. "Soon, everyone will know what you are hiding." That sentence echoed in his ears like a curse. If Daniel told the people, Jonah's life would be over. The crowd that once cheered him would tear him apart. The police would drag him away, and he would never see freedom again. The next evening, Jonah carried on as usual at his stall, but his mind was heavy. Every time he sliced the meat, he imagined cutting Daniel instead. He served the smiling customers with trembling hands, forcing laughter through dry lips. His eyes searched for Daniel in the crowd, but Daniel did not appear that night. That absence did not calm Jonah, it only made him more nervous. He wondered where Daniel was and what he was planning. Late at night, Jonah packed his knives into a small sack and tied his apron around his waist. Instead of going straight home, he walked through the narrow streets, asking questions quietly. He asked the other traders if they had seen Daniel, pretending he was just a concerned friend. One man pointed toward a small compound near the edge of town, saying Daniel often stayed there. Jonah nodded, hiding his excitement behind a forced smile. When he reached his room, Jonah sat in silence, staring at his knife. His hands shook as he picked it up, the blade shining under the weak light of the kerosene lamp. He whispered to himself, "It is either him or me. If I do nothing, I am finished." He set the knife down and covered his face with both hands. For the first time, Jonah began to plan something darker than selling human flesh. He began to plan murder. Jonah could not rest. His mind was filled with Daniel's face, those sharp eyes that seemed to see through every lie. By the third night, he had made his decision. He wrapped his knife in a piece of cloth, slipped it under his shirt, and left his room quietly. The street was silent, only the sound of crickets filling the air. He walked fast, his sandals brushing the dust, his eyes darting left and right. The small compound where Daniel stayed was dark, except for a dim lantern flickering inside. Jonah's heart pounded as he crept closer. His palms were wet with sweat, and the knife felt heavy in his hand. He told himself this was the only way. If Daniel lived, Jonah's secret would die. If Daniel died, Jonah's business would continue. He reached the wooden door and pushed it gently. It creaked, making his heart almost stop. He waited, holding his breath, but no one stirred. Slowly, he stepped inside. The room smelled of kerosene and damp clothes. Daniel was lying on a mat in the corner, fast asleep. His chest rose and fell with calm breaths. Jonah stood over him, knife raised. The sweat from his forehead dripped onto the blade. His hand trembled as he stared down at the man who could destroy him. All Jonah needed to do was strike once, and his secret would remain safe. But just as he tightened his grip, Daniel's eyes opened. They locked on Jonah in the darkness. For a moment, neither man moved. The knife hovered in the air, and Jonah's breath came in gasps. Daniel did not scream. Instead, he whispered, "I knew you would come." Jonah froze. The knife in his hand shook as Daniel slowly sat up, his eyes never leaving Jonah's face. The room was silent except for Jonah's heavy breathing. He had expected shouting, fighting, maybe even begging, but Daniel's calm voice unsettled him more than anything. "You cannot hide forever," Daniel said softly. "One day, everyone will know what you are doing." Jonah's chest tightened. "Keep quiet," he hissed. "If you open your mouth, you will not live to see tomorrow." His voice was low but full of panic. He pressed the knife closer, the tip almost touching Daniel's neck. But Daniel did not flinch. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his eyes sharp and unafraid. "Do it," he whispered. "Kill me now. But know this, if I die, my words will still reach others. Someone else already knows." Jonah's heart skipped. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice shaking. Daniel gave a small, cold smile. "Do you think I would confront you alone without telling someone first? I left a note. If anything happens to me, the truth will come out." Jonah's hands grew weak. His knife lowered slowly as fear spread through him like fire. The thought of killing Daniel no longer felt safe. If Daniel truly had left evidence, then Jonah was trapped. He stepped back, breathing hard, his eyes darting around the small room as if looking for escape. Daniel stood up slowly, his shadow stretching across the wall. "This is your last chance," he said. "Stop now, before it is too late." Jonah's lips trembled, but no words came. He turned and rushed out of the room, his footsteps echoing into the night. Jonah ran through the dark streets until his chest burned. His legs shook as he reached his small room and locked the door behind him. He threw the knife onto the floor and collapsed on his bed, gasping for air. Daniel's words echoed in his head like a curse. "I left a note, if anything happens to me, the truth will come out." He pressed his hands against his ears, trying to block out the memory, but it stayed. Sleep refused to come. Instead, Jonah sat in the darkness, staring at the bundles of black nylon under his table. Each bag carried his crime, his shame, his survival. For the first time, Jonah began to feel that his secret was slipping out of his control. The next day, Jonah tried to act normal at his stall. He roasted meat, sprinkled pepper, and forced smiles at his customers. But his eyes kept scanning the crowd for Daniel. Hours passed, and still Daniel did not appear. Jonah's chest grew heavy with unease. Where was he? Was he already speaking to someone? Was the note real? Late in the evening, a policeman walked through the market. Jonah's hands nearly dropped the knife. The officer greeted some traders, laughed with a few women, then bought roasted corn and walked away. But Jonah's mind screamed, "They are coming for me. Daniel has told them." That night, Jonah sat in his room, shaking. He had escaped Daniel's knife-edge warning, but he felt trapped in a cage of fear. Every knock on a neighbor's door, every passing step outside, every sudden voice made him think the police were about to break into his room. For the first time since he started selling flesh as Suya, Jonah felt that his end was near. Jonah woke up to loud voices outside his window. His heart jumped, and he rushed to the door, thinking the police had finally come. But when he peeped through the crack, he saw traders arguing about stolen goods. He sighed in relief, but the fear inside him did not leave. Every sound now felt like a warning that his secret was close to being exposed. At the market that day, Jonah could hardly focus. His hands shook so much that one customer complained about the meat being cut too roughly. Jonah forced a smile and apologized, but his eyes kept searching for Daniel. The young man did not come again. That absence only made Jonah more restless. Was Daniel hiding on purpose? Was he waiting for the right time to strike? As the crowd thinned in the evening, Jonah sat by the fire, lost in thought. Suddenly, he noticed a boy standing near his stall. The boy was about 12, barefoot, with curious eyes. He held a folded piece of paper in his hand. Without saying a word, he stretched it toward Jonah. Jonah's throat went dry as he took the note. His hands trembled as he unfolded the paper. The words were short but sharp, "I warned you. This is only the beginning." The boy ran off before Jonah could ask any questions. Jonah's chest tightened as he read the words again. His knees grew weak, and sweat rolled down his face. He stuffed the note into his pocket quickly, looking around to see if anyone had noticed. Nobody had. The market noise went on as usual, but for Jonah, the sound faded. The note was proof that Daniel was still watching him, still testing him, still waiting for the right moment. Jonah realized one thing clearly: Daniel was playing a game he could not win. That night, Jonah sat in his small room with the note spread out on the floor. The words stared back at him like fire: "This is only the beginning." He rubbed his head with both hands, whispering to himself, "What does he want from me? Why won't he leave me alone?" The more he thought, the more he realized Daniel was not just trying to expose him. Daniel was enjoying the fear. He was toying with him, step by step, like a cat playing with a trapped rat. Jonah could not eat. He could not sleep. Each tick of the clock sounded louder in the silence. His eyes kept darting to the knife lying beside his bed. He had almost used it on Daniel once, but he had failed. Now, the thought of trying again felt even more dangerous. What if Daniel had truly left evidence behind? What if the police were already circling around him, waiting for the right time to strike? The next day at the market, Jonah forced himself to act normal. He cut the meat, sprinkled the pepper, and smiled at customers, but his heart was not in it. The smell of roasted flesh that once gave him pride now felt like poison. Whenever he wrapped the suya in paper, he imagined the crowd suddenly realizing what they were eating. He imagined their laughter turning into screams, their smiles into anger. Near sunset, Jonah noticed something that made his skin crawl. Across the road, leaning against a tree, Daniel stood watching. He did not speak. He did not move. He only stared. Jonah's knife slipped, nearly cutting his own hand. He looked away quickly, but when he looked again, Daniel was gone. Jonah's chest tightened. Daniel was no longer just a man. He was now a shadow that followed him everywhere. Jonah's fear turned into sickness. He could no longer enjoy the noise of the market or the smell of roasted meat. Every face looked suspicious. Every laugh sounded like a whisper against him. He roasted suya with trembling hands, sweat dripping into the fire, but his customers did not notice. They chewed and praised him, never knowing the truth behind the taste. That evening, as Jonah closed his store, he found another folded note under his tray. His stomach twisted as he opened it. The words were simple, "Your time is almost up." Jonah's knees grew weak. He looked around, but the market was almost empty. Who had placed the note there? Was it Daniel himself, or was someone else now involved? Jonah stumbled home, clutching the note like a burning coal. Inside his room, he spread it on the table beside the first one. His hands shook as he whispered, "He will destroy me. He will not stop until everyone knows." His eyes fell on the knife again. The thought of killing Daniel returned, but this time it felt heavier. Daniel had made it clear, if anything happened to him, the truth would still come out. Sleep escaped Jonah. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Daniel's face, calm and steady, watching him from the shadows. At dawn, he decided to follow Daniel instead. If he could discover what Daniel was planning, maybe he could still save himself. The next day, Jonah packed his knives early but did not go straight to the market. He hid at a corner where he knew Daniel usually passed. Hours dragged like years, but finally, Jonah saw him walking with a small bag slung across his shoulder. Jonah's eyes narrowed. His breath came fast. Quietly, Jonah began to follow. Jonah followed Daniel through the narrow streets, keeping a safe distance. The sun was setting, painting the sky with red and gold, but Jonah's eyes saw only one thing, Daniel's shadow ahead of him. Daniel walked slowly, as if he had no fear in the world. The small bag on his shoulder swung with each step, and Jonah's mind raced with questions. What was inside? Could it be the note Daniel claimed he left as evidence? They passed the market, the mosque, and finally reached a quiet part of town where few people walked. Jonah's heartbeat grew louder with every step. He hid behind walls, ducked into corners, his eyes fixed on Daniel. At last, Daniel stopped near an old, abandoned house. He looked around carefully, then slipped inside. Jonah waited for a moment, then crept to the doorway. The wood was rotten, the hinges rusty. He pushed it gently and entered. Inside, the room smelled of dust and old smoke. His eyes searched through the dim light, and he froze when he saw Daniel sitting at a small wooden table. Papers were spread out before him, and his hand moved quickly with a pen. Jonah's stomach turned. He is writing everything down. Daniel raised his head slowly, his eyes meeting Jonah's in the half-darkness. There was no surprise in his face, no fear. He simply said, "I knew you would follow me." Jonah's throat went dry. He tried to speak but only managed a whisper. "What are you writing?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, tapping the paper with his finger. "The truth. And very soon, everyone will read it." Jonah's chest tightened as if the walls were closing in. He realized he had only two choices left, run or stop Daniel now. Jonah stepped closer, his hands shaking. The papers on the table looked like death to him. Words written in Daniel's bold handwriting carried the power to end everything, his store, his freedom, even his life. Jonah's eyes darted to his knife hidden under his shirt. The thought burned in his mind, one strike, and all this will be over. But Daniel's calm eyes stopped him. "You think killing me will save you?" Daniel said quietly. "It won't. People will still find out. My words will live even if I don't." Jonah's throat felt tight. "Why are you doing this to me?" he asked, his voice almost breaking. Daniel leaned forward, his face hard. "Because people must know what they are eating. They must know the monster you are. Do you think you can keep feeding them flesh without punishment? The blood of the innocent cries out. One day, it will swallow you." Jonah staggered back, his heart pounding. His ears rang with Daniel's words. The blood of the innocent cries out. For a moment, he felt like shadows filled the room, pressing against him, whispering his sins aloud. His knees grew weak, and he dropped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I never wanted this, Jonah muttered. I only wanted to survive. Daniel did not move. His voice was firm. Survival does not give you the right to destroy others. You chose this path, and now it is catching up with you. Silence filled the room, heavy and sharp. Jonah's eyes shifted back to the knife. His chest rose and fell with anger and fear. His mind screamed at him, do it now, or you are finished. Slowly, Jonah reached for the blade. Jonah's hand wrapped around the knife, his breath coming in short gasps. The blade caught the faint light of the lantern, glinting like cold fire. Daniel did not flinch. He sat still, his eyes steady, watching every movement. If you kill me, Daniel said softly, you will only bring your end faster. Jonah's mind raced. He saw flashes of the crowd at his stall, smiling as they ate. He saw the black nylon bags hidden in his room. He saw blood, fire, and the faces of those whose flesh he had roasted. His stomach twisted. His grip on the knife tightened. With a cry, Jonah raised the blade, but his hand froze. In that silence, heavy footsteps sounded at the doorway. The rotten door creaked open, and two policemen entered, their guns pointed straight at him. Behind them, the boy who had delivered the note peeked from the shadows, his eyes wide. Jonah dropped the knife. His knees gave way, and he fell to the floor. The policeman rushed forward, dragging him up roughly. Daniel rose slowly, his face calm, his mission complete. You thought you could hide forever, one officer said, tightening the handcuffs around Jonah's wrist. But evil always comes to light. The crowd outside grew quickly as people gathered, whispering and pointing. Some screamed, some covered their mouths, and some shouted in anger. The officers pulled Jonah out, his head bent low. The papers Daniel had written lay on the table, ready to tell the world the truth. And the truth came quickly. By nightfall, the market was full of chaos. Mothers wept, men cursed, and children cried as they realized what they had been eating. When one man unwrapped his suya and found a human finger inside, the crowd erupted in horror. They had been eating human flesh all along.